So years later, I went to art school, did graphic design, publicity, went to London, and I went up. I heard they were doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit in London. I'm trying to remember what year that would be now. You'd know better than me, actually, the year. But the year Roger Rabbit was made. And I went along with a bunch of artwork, and they looked at my portfolio and said, well, this is very nice, but we're looking for experienced animators. So I went away and taught myself, basically. I got a coffee table with a glass top and a light, because you do what's called the in-betweens, in between the animators. That's your entry level. That's when you learn your craft. It takes at least 5 years to become a good traditional animator, So I taught myself over 6 months and then went back. Well, I went actually to some other studios, and one studio said, look, this is a really good test. We'll show it to Disney. And I went up, they recommended me. And I went up and they said, well, we'll give you an in-between test. And I did it. And then they asked me to do evening classes for 10 weeks. And then they hired me at the lowest level as an in-betweener. And amazingly, after 6 months, they were so desperate to get footage done, they were chucking me scenes to animate at the end, which
oh, wow.
I can't believe it. But there was a big budget and everything, but it's so manic at the end of these productions. So it was trial by fire, and you're thrown in at the deep end, and I loved it. But it's a long journey from that. Although that was my job on Roger Rabbit, they didn't just whisk me over to LA then. I wasn't experienced enough to get through immigration. They have to prove they can't find another American to do the same job. So you have to prove exceptional ability. So I ended up going to Manchester, working on something called Canducula, which you probably won't know. And they previously did Danger Mouse. Then I saw that Don Bluth was setting up in Ireland, Don Bluth Studios. They were a breakaway from Disney. And I saw one of your podcasts. You mentioned All Dogs Go to Heaven, I think. Anyway, I went there.
Yeah, thanks for adding to my childhood trauma with All Dogs Go to Heaven. My goodness, I'm still have nightmares about that sometimes.
It's a dark film.
It is.
For kids, which is great. Actually, that was Don Bluth at his best with Secret of Nim, was at his best before they dipped down into a series of films, unfortunately. But there's a great scene there with Charlie, with Anne-Marie in the background. Charlie's in front, and he's being, it's full of bravado, and he's saying, she means nothing to you. He's talking to Itchy, the little dog. He's saying, she means nothing to me. She's nothing. And she walks down behind, and she's got tears in her eyes. And the way it's composed with him in the foreground, and she comes down the background. That's a great bit of directing. So a terrific film, I thought. So it wasn't until I worked at Don Bluth and became a lead animator on Thumbelina. I then heard that Disney was looking for animators, and they actually put an advert in the newspaper back in the day. No online stuff. There's an advert looking for animators. And I got all my animation together, photocopied my scenes, and I had a portfolio this big. It cost me £100 to send it to Disney back then, sent it over. And then I got a call a couple of weeks later, and I'd actually said to my wife, well, let's go to the Paris studio, because she didn't want to go to LA. You'd had the riots then and earthquakes. So I said, okay, I'll apply to the Paris studio. So when they called, they said, well, we'd like to offer you a job. I said, in the Paris studio, right? I said, no, LA, we want you next week. And boom, I went over, and it changed my life, and it set up everything, although it was animation and I'm doing live action. We'll talk about it in a bit, but there's so many transferable skills, and the people that I've met along the way, working with actors, all kinds of things. I mean, at Disney, it was almost like being at a university. You had life drawing every lunchtime with Steve Houston, Glenn Vilppu, some of the best artists. And Chris Vogler, we'd have lectures on story. All part of your job, for free, as part of your working afternoon. They would put you in a class. So Chris Vogler, who wrote The Hero's Journey, and he was involved in The Lion King. We were able to pick his brains. You got to meet some top actors. Some of them did the characters that I worked on. So it was a moment in time. 2D animation, Lion King had come out. Boom, it was massive. DreamWorks set up. All our salaries doubled, which was nice. But what's interesting is that it's a roller coaster, this business. And so 2D animation, everyone was jumping on the bandwagon. Warner Brothers set up, and I'll segue into the Iron Giant in a minute. And it was a magic. You don't realize when you're in it how incredible it is. You take it for granted. And you get offered some money, and you say, "Oh no, I want more." What was I thinking? It was a great time. I was in LA for about 7 years, but Toy Story came out. John Lasseter had gone off, set up Pixar with Steve Jobs, and he's a brilliant storyteller. And Disney, their storytelling was sort of declining too, so it was a double whammy. So CGI was new and different, but they also were telling better stories by this stage. And 2D collapsed, completely collapsed. So suddenly we were in demand, and it was kind of a slow death. Within a few years, you couldn't really make a full-time living doing what we did. It was so specific. It got blown out of the water. So animators diversed into storyboarding, which I did for a while, CGI, which I did for a while. So they diversed into other areas, and some, like the cleanup artists, got other jobs because that job didn't exist anymore. But as I say, it's all a part of the process. I was able to meet some great people when I was there. Howard Kazanjian became a friend, producer of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Return of the Jedi. I got to meet a lot of great people that stay lifelong friends.
Awesome.
And it's been even though I'm back in England now, I'm still feel very connected to Hollywood.